So, a very good evening to all of you. On behalf of the weekly webinar series conducted by IEEE Malabar subsection in association with IEEE Malabar Hub and IET Kolkot Subcenter, I extend a warm welcome to each one of you gathered here for the 63rd webinar on the topic Big Data Technologies, Architecture and Use Cases. Today, we are honored to have with us Mr. Karimullah Sheikh, Enterprise Data Architect, Tata Consultancy Services. Mr. Karim is postgraduated from REC Calicut with MTech Honors degree in Power Electronics. He is certified in Insurance Domain and Big Data, Snowflake, Data Science, Artificial Intelligence, Machine Language Technologies. For the past 2 decades, he led various large-scale transformation programs across US, UK, and Australia for BFSI and retail clients. His primary areas of interest are data science, artificial intelligence, machine language, big data, cloud, Snowflake, data architecture, and data modeling. He has 20 plus years of experience in TCS and was the program manager to lead 150 plus team members, and he has been awarded the Best Auditor Award thrice in TCS and also various other service committed awards. With huge respect and admiration, let me now invite Mr. Karimullah Sheikh to start the session. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Priyanka. Thank you, Sabik, for this opportunity. Let me share my screen. Yeah, are you able to see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, yes.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. And yeah, this is the session on big data technologies and their evaluations and the use cases and architectures behind all of these. Okay. So the agenda of this session will cover that. Give me a second. Yeah, the agenda of this session is big data overview, big data technologies and tools and their evaluations, and the key architectures behind these technologies and use cases and case study. So let's go through this evaluation of data. Okay. Prior to 1960s, all the data is handled in the form of on paper. Okay, either people used to write all the things either on paper or they used to type on paper, and everything is on paper based. And this way that in 1960, IBM came up with the opportunity to digitize all this data. Okay, so they thought that there is everything is on paper. There is a potential risks involved in that, especially in countries like US. If there is any fire accident happen, there is especially in the insurance I worked called Hartford Insurance. It's near to New York. They don't have any papers to produce that what happened to that, whether they had insurance or not. So, but this insurance companies did some investigation. They paid back everything. But so this IBM, they recognized that there is a need for digitizing this data, and that's where they came up with this file-based storing of data, and they used to store the data in tapes. And then they came up with a large scale of mainframe machines in those days. And the people who are working on this, okay, they used to code the programs, and then they need to take this program. So let's say person worked on in India. Take an example of the CTO of TCS, Anant Krishnan. He worked in India. He prepared a program in those days. He need to take that program to Germany or US, wherever that mainframe machines is sitting, and he need to take that and compile and execute that. It's that much tedious of the process in those days. And later in 1970s, there is a revolution in the database management system. And but here this database management system, again IBM came up with a database called IMSDB. So it's this IMSDB is a kind of a hierarchical database. That means there will be a root segment. Let's take an example of a bank. Okay, so a bank will have that a bank as a root segment, and that multiple customers, they are parents, and they, again their transactions and all that is a child. And so there are so many limitations and challenges in handling this database management system in terms of volume is growing large. They cannot handle, they have limitations that a parent to child should be 1,000 only. If they have beyond 1,000, they need to again store that previous data and recreate that. All those and the volume of data, and if there is any updates happens, the handling those updates on the data is very complex in those days. So it's become a necessity to come up with a relational database management system. So this relational database management system, typically this handles that online transactional processing data and a point of sales data, like you are going a supermarket and they will you take the items whatever you required and they will give you a bill. It's a more like a kind of a small scale data, and also the data is highly diverse. Okay, so it's very difficult to find out some insights out of this data in this RDBMS. So this way in 1990s, the data warehouses came in picture. Okay, so Teradata is the one of the popular data warehouse technology came in 1990s. It's developed by NCR Corporation, and later IBM came up with the Netezza data warehouse, and Oracle came up with their own Oracle warehouse builder. And then in the 2008, Oracle introduced the Oracle Exadata. All these different missions came in this data warehouse world. Primarily, their focus is to bring out some business out of this data, okay, some valuable information out of this data. One classical example is in 1994. Okay, Teradata has done some research on that retail data. They found out that on a Friday, people are buying both beer and diapers together. Okay, so when they did this analysis, they come to know that people who are having the family and kids, okay, they need diapers for the entire that week, and people are very stressful because of family and other responsibilities. They need a beer to get relaxed in the weekend. So that's why then they recommended those combinations to Walmart. So Walmart used to put those beer and diaper together at the same place so that customers can easily buy both of them. So it helped them to increase their sales. Okay, it's one of the classical example of business out of the data. And then in the 1995 onwards, the traditional distributed systems means there is a earlier the data is only in the structured format. Then slowly we started getting the data in different formats. So we started getting the PDFs, images, all videos, audios, different kinds of data. And the data is becoming very huge. Okay, processing the data will be very difficult using the traditional data warehouse missions. That's where they brought a concept called a distributed. Okay, distributed means instead of keeping the data at one place, keep the data in multiple places, as like I mentioned here in the 3 different places, and process the data using some distributed processing systems. So that's where this big data came in picture in 2005. So the primary objective of this big data is to collect the data from various forms. It's not only the structured data, it's unstructured, semi-structured. It will be movies, videos, or files, images, any kind of thing. Okay, all the we need to collect the data and store that data and share that data with others. And the volume, handle the volume of growth in exabytes of data. And also this data, as I said earlier, the way Teradata has done the research, same thing need to be done on every data in every organization to do some research on that data come up with the data science people. They need to do some analysis on this and come up with some insights of this data, and finally produce that visualizations to business users. So this way, this big data is came in very popular in 2005 onwards, and even today also very highly paying and very demanding technology across the world. And what is this big data? So big data is a phrase or methodology that defines the way of acquiring the data from different sources, and curing the data means you need to clean the data, come up with a quality of data out of that, and then store that huge volume of data and process that data for bringing out the insights and analyze this data from huge volume of heterogeneous systems. This is not only from the systems that is, it's the data might be coming from the any kind of sources. Okay, so it might be different ways of data is coming from various places. We need that data will come in the different frequencies as well. Okay, means it will be not only in a kind of a batch. Okay, it is real-time data, means continuously we need to process to stream the data. So it's in a stipulated period of time. So these are the things that traditional systems, as I said earlier, the warehouse systems were not able to handle this kind of things. So that's where this big data came in picture to handle all this. So if we look into this far rightmost side, so we have this data, we have some visuals out of this data, and analytics out of this data. This data is predominantly came from this relational database kind of system. So, and then if we, this is a generated out of this business generated data. If we look into this human generated data, day by day, we are using so many social media apps, and it's like Facebook, Twitter, emails, and many social media data is coming, and different kind of logs are generating out of this data, and we are sharing this data and communicating this data with many people across the world. And this way, this data is becoming huge. Okay, if you see this business generated data is one time in the right side, then this human generated data will be 10 times of that. Okay, and then the next far left side one is this mission generated data. This if you see this is the satellites are sending a lot of data as like earth images or weather forecasting details. All this, it's a different kinds of data is coming from satellites. Different sensors are passing the data, like if someone is violated that traffic rules, they immediately they will capture that information and they will pass to that respective authorities. And there are different kinds of audios, videos, and logs, and then recordings. All these are the different, it's mission generated data. And if we look into this, this mission generated data is 100 times more than that other data. So the volume of data is day by day growing very fast, and today we are at 140 gigabytes of data, and the growth will be far more, and every year it is going to double up. Okay, that's the kind of volume of data it's growing. So if we coming to this characteristics of big data, so big data, as I said, it's a handling of a huge volume of data, and the different varieties of data. It's not only structured, it's a semi-structured, unstructured data, and bring out the value out of this data. Okay, so that really business can benefit out of this data, and customers can, companies can get the benefit out of this data. This is the intention of this. And then this is the veracity, means the trustworthiness of data. If there is inconsistencies in the data, uncertainty in data, we need to, big data need to handle all these kind of scenarios and bring out this trustworthiness of the data to business. And the last one is a velocity. So it's a data is coming in the different frequency. We need to handle all this frequency of data. And okay, so this is the idea of these are the characteristics of big data. So look into this, the evaluation of the technologies in big data. So the philosopher Plato, he said, necessity is the mother of invention. Okay, so earlier we didn't had that necessity of bringing up all these distributed systems, but the volume of data and the characteristics of data, all this is it's pushed human beings to come up with some new technologies and tools. So this where this Mike Caprella, he's one of the pioneer in this big data technologies. So he started a project in 1997 called WebCrawler. So what is this means is in 1994, uh, earlier this US military, they invented this internet and they used it vastly for their military purpose. Later in 94, they have handed over this to public usage. And then everyone started creating their own websites and all that. So this searching of those websites and processing those websites and okay, if someone is requested, I need a www.google.com. So how fast we can bring out that website from that World Wide Web. So this where there he was doing some research on index the content of websites all across the internet. And in the 2001, another pioneer called Doug Cutting. So he's a famous person in the big data side, and he was working another project called Lucene. Lucene is his wife's name. He named that project as a Lucene, and he also doing this search technology on indexing this websites. Since both are working on the same thing in 2003, both came together and they came a new technology called Nudge. So Nudge is a search engine for the purpose of WebIndex. So this is where this all this distributed file systems came in picture based on these two guys research work. And in 2003, this Google came up with a white paper called Google File System. And this Google File System, they have gone through this white paper and they combined their research work with the Google File System. And finally, they came up with the Nudge distributed file system. And this Nudge distributed file system, they created a distributed system to process 1.7 million websites. This is the count was present in those days, okay, 1.7 million websites. And in this Nudge DFS, NDFS, there are certain challenges in that architecture where they have developed. So the partial failures of nodes, it's difficult to handle, and the synchronization and the coordination of data between various nodes was a challenge. And the non-linear scaling is not possible. And the huge data transfer, all these are the challenges. And then to come up with all these challenges, they have came up with another file system called Hadoop distributed file system. And so that's where this Nudge became the HDFS. And in 2005, Google came up with another white paper called MapReduce. So this MapReduce is the simplified data processing on large clusters. So, so far what we are looking in the HDFS or NDFS is that data storing aspect. Then there should be something to processing that way, that data. That's where this MapReduce came in 2005. So combining this MapReduce and this Hadoop distributed file system, in 2006, the Hadoop first version came into market. And this was written in Java. And the earlier code is that HDFS has the 5,000 lines and MapReduce has the 6,000 lines of code. And later they handed over this to open source community. So the corporation called Apache Software Foundation. So after that, ASF Apache is handled all this big data related projects. And so in 2008, to handle all these clusters and okay, creating the nodes and monitoring the nodes and all that, for that purpose, Cloudera is they came up with the world's first distributed system for Hadoop. And they have came up with the Hadoop user interface and the Cloudera manager. So this the intention of them is to securely deploying the code and monitoring that nodes and clusters and alerting for any failures and management of entire the Cloudera platform. Okay, and in 2009, Yahoo, so far, whatever the work is done is everything is research and some technologies and tools, and no one has done the benchmarking how it is performing. In 2009, Yahoo took this Hadoop system and they processed, they used 3,600 nodes of a cluster, and they processed 1 petabytes of data in 16 hours, and then they benchmarked this one. Okay, this Hadoop can able to handle 1 petabytes of data using this many nodes in 16 hours. Okay, and so far with this duck cutting, all these people are working with Yahoo very closely. They were not happy with Cloudera coming into market and grabbing their share, and that's where they have encouraged another company, and they funded to create a competitor for Cloudera. That's where in 2011, Hortonworks came in picture. And then after that, many companies started using this Hadoop very extensively from 2007 onwards, especially. This in 2006, Google came up with another white paper called Bigtable. So if today, if someone is working the Google cloud platform, they might have aware of this Bigtable and a BigQuery and all these things. Okay, so this the white paper, and based on this white paper, this HBase was developed by Apache Software Foundation. And then in the Yahoo in 2007, using this for all this, the backbone is your HDFS and MapReduce. So these are the backbone, and all these are the toppings on top of the. It's like you have a plain vanilla cake called HDFS and MapReduce. On top of that, you have like some creaming and some coloring and all that. So that's what all these are. The okay, HBase is the one. So HBase is the kind of a NoSQL database, and to handle that any kind of, not only SQL, we can handle any kind of data. That's where this HBase. This Yahoo has many engineers. They are specialized in the scripting language. That's where Yahoo brought up this Pig, Apache Pig. This is a Pig Latin, and this has that kind of a scripting language. Let's say you are giving some feedback in the social media, they will take that one and they will pass that data, and they will see that whether this customer is happy with that particular, happy with Amazon or Flipkart or not, what kind of feedback he is giving. All this they are bringing insights out of that, our feedbacks, whatever we are posting at various social media channels. And in 2010, this Facebook came up with this Hive. So this Facebook has more engineers. They are familiar on the SQLs. They created a SQL. It's kind of SQL queries on top of a HDFS. HDFS is the majorly a file-based storage, and they created some kind of a logical layer on top of this HDFS and came up with this Hive. And 2011, this LinkedIn, okay, they came up with this Apache Kafka. So Kafka main intention is to do this streaming processing. Even if you see today, you have you open your LinkedIn, your laptop, and also in the same time you opened in the your mobile. Okay, if you read one notification that it came to your mobile, it will automatically disappear from your laptop. So that's kind of powerful streaming they developed using Kafka. So then that's where this Kafka is one of the more powerful tool in this big data technologies. Okay, it's a very powerful in streaming the data, and it's a widely accepted technology. And then Twitter came with a Storm, and then this Apache Software Foundation, they came up with another one called Apache Impala. So the problem with the Hive is if you send a query like a select count star from this table, it will take a minimum 5 minutes to give a simple result. So to avoid that one, they came up with the Impala. So Impala is a massive parallel processing MPP SQL query engine, it will give that result very fast. Okay, that's where this Impala. And then in Arun Murthy, he worked in the Horton Works. So he came with this architecture called yet another resource negotiator. Earlier, whatever there in MapReduce, we have limitations, so we cannot extend our nodes too very heavily, and the cluster size is very limited. To increase this cluster size, he came up with the YAN. Okay, so it's a YAN is a like a data operating system. We can able to scale up to this 30,000 nodes per cluster also. Okay, and above as well. Okay, and after inclusion of this YAN, Hadoop, which was that version 1, it became version 2 in 2013 onwards. Then they, even though they felt that this is a very, the processing speed is not that much great, they want to process the data as like a Spark, okay, and a speed of light, okay. So that's where the Spark is came into a picture, okay, in 2011. It's a PhD project done by in the University of California in Berkeley, AMP lab, and they came up with this Spark, and the Apache Spark is came into ASF in 2014. The Spark is a very fast. It's a kind of 100 times faster than the MapReduce. Okay, so this is what the entire evaluation of technologies across this from 2005 onwards. Okay, then this Hadoop, okay, if we want to understand what is this Hadoop, as we saw, Hadoop is a open source Apache software framework. It will provide the distributed storage called HDFS and also distributed processing using both MapReduce and YAN. Okay, on a commodity hardware. So commodity hardware means it's like a low cost machine. It might be anything like your laptop also a storage. Okay, it's a kind of you can put any low cost machine also, and it will take care of redundancy of data handling. Okay, that's the kind of a very powerful tool that is Hadoop. Okay, so the Hadoop characteristics, okay, it handles a huge volume of data, and it will scale very highly, and it's flexible to handle anything. And the data locality means it will do this entire the computation at lowest end at the data. Normally in the traditional systems like Oracle or Teradata, they will go, if you say, okay, select I need a certain 10 columns from table A and table B. What they will do is it's like a client server architecture. So the client will say that I need 10 columns from table A and table B, and the server will go and hit the database, and database will give that full volume of A and B. That A and B tables need to again process back to the server, and then server applies that whatever the query it's written, and then the result will go back to that client. Whereas in this Hadoop technology, everything will apply at a database level. The end result, whichever that 10 columns is required, and those 10 columns data alone will come back to server and then client. So it's that's where it's a data locality at data level. And then highly reliable technology, and it's integrated with all kind of sources, and it's a cost effective. And cost effective in the sense, if you see here, we have done the comparison on the cost of different technologies. So we have cost per terabyte, okay, 333 for Hadoop, whereas in Netezza it's 10,000. It's at 30,000. It's 30 times we are saving using the Hadoop, and when it's come to Oracle, it's 42 times saving, and in Teradata it's 50 times saving. So Teradata is the one of the costly, but it's a very robust and a strong and powerful mission in earlier. So then what is so the next question is a very good question. It's when to use Hadoop. Okay, Hadoop is mainly recommended for data may expect to grow exponentially. It's not recommended for processing the small volume of data. Okay, it's a process a small number of big files. Okay, it's that's the kind of means if you see that in future the data will go very huge. Okay, use Hadoop in those kind of places. And any type of data, as I said earlier, it can handle any structured, unstructured, and semi-structured videos, audios, anything it will handle. And it's good for data lake, like you bring any kind of data and store here, and then use that for different processing using the Hadoop layer as a data lake. And it's a cost-effective solution, as we saw in this comparison, and high scalability and throughput. The throughput in the sense per second, okay, how many records it will process back. Okay, so that's a very highly scalable and highly fast. The throughput is more, and store heterogeneous historical and live data at the same place. Means you can use this for batch processing, okay, and also you can use for streaming of data continuously, and all kind of purpose you can use. It's all under one roof. Okay, that means you can bring this data, acquire the data, and bring into a kind of data lake, kind of place one storage in HDFS. Then you can write a ETL queries, ETL extract, transformation, and the load using a Hive or Pig or any kind of a language. And then you can return the data in HDFS file, and you can do kind of data mining out of this data, analyze the data, and use the data analysis using that Elasticsearch and Kibana kind of visualization. And also it can be used for machine learning purpose as well. So all under is one roof, it will be available. And also the time series analysis, like real-time data to analyze the data also, this is very useful. And very important thing, the next one is that when not to use Hadoop. Okay, normally people will say if we want to do anything, people say what is good. Okay, but it's better to know what is not good in that. Okay, so when not to use Hadoop is a very powerful thing that everyone need to aware if we want to work in this Hadoop environment or big data. So if volume is less or not to grow, then it's not recommended. Okay. And if a frequent update on the data and the frequent changes in the application on data, then don't use this one. Okay. Means it's not recommended for data. Let's say you have some data like today you are a bachelor. Okay. Next year you got married, your marital status got change to married, and you become a father. All this kind of different status change, it's one example I'm saying. So the data is continuously changing, then those you need to update that and maintain that. Okay, those kind of places, it is not a right solution. So those kind of places we can use the traditional data warehouse systems itself. And also the next point, it's saying it's not a replacement of the complete traditional warehouse. So the traditional warehouse, whichever developed on Teradata, Netezza, it will sit as is. And this is a complement on top of the warehouse for specific use cases purpose. And it's not for OLTP, like online transaction processing. Like if you want to book a train tickets, or if you want to do some sales in the supermarket, those kind of online transaction process, that means it's like interactive. The web page will, front end system will go and continuously hit with the database, and it will take the data from the database. Again, it will store some data. Those kind of places, it's not recommended one. Okay, so these are the 4 points very important to remember if you are working in this big data environment. And then this Hadoop components, as I said earlier, Hadoop has that HDFS storage, MapReduce processing, and the YARN is the another architecture. and these two MapReduce and AND for processing purpose. And there are some common libraries to support that APIs. And the characteristics of Hadoop, it supports more of a batch to process a large volume of data and a small number of huge files. Okay, the file size should be big and okay, that's the second thing. And then streaming data access. Okay, write once and read many times. And then Hadoop terminologies. Okay, like a data center, it's a collection of cluster and storage. All this called a data center, like AWS, Azure, or GCP. All these are the data centers like that. And it's a cluster is a meaning of a group of interconnected nodes, and rack means that a group of disks or storage, and that connect with the processing power. And the node is a physical machine, as your laptop also may be a node, and the disk is a storage space, and the block is your file. Okay, these are the terminologies in Hadoop. And Hadoop used to achieve fault tolerance of the cluster and the workload balance of all the nodes. Okay, that's the place it's used. Okay. So moving on to the next one, this is the Hadoop high level architecture. So we have two things. One is the storage layer. Another one is the processing layer. This storage layer has that HDFS, and the processing layer we have MapReduce or YAM. Okay, we can decide which one to use for processing. So there is in the storage we have a name node and we have data node. Name node will act as a master and all the data nodes will act as a slaves. Okay, it's a master slave architecture. So it will name node will give the pass all the instructions to data nodes, and it will get the job completion status from these name nodes. And same thing in the above in the processing side also, we have a resource manager job tracker, and there is the equivalent master slave architecture. The slaves are like task tracker or application master. So this resource manager controls all these application masters to processing of this data. When coming into this HDFS architecture, it's a high level architecture, as I mentioned. Let's say there is a client. Okay, we have the client will say he will pass this command. What he's saying in this command is, hey Hadoop, I want to store this data.txt file in our Hadoop HDFS storage. Okay, this is a kind of simple request. This command is to store data.txt into HDFS. So the client will go send this request to name node. What name node it will do is it will see that whether this client has access and whether there is a storage is available in this all this data nodes, and all this it will check and it will approve the request to client. This is the first place, and this name node is the first primary point of contact in this cluster. And once it's sent this approve this one, and it will create it will start a Java virtual machine, JVM. So JVM is a kind of a program. Okay, this program will handle all this Hadoop process. So it will tell customer that yeah, I accepted yours, and okay, there are nodes, node 2, 3, 4 is available to store your data. So yeah, these are all these nodes are available. Let's say he want to store this data.txt is 130 MB. In general, in the Hadoop, we have the each file will be stored in the 128 megabytes. Okay, so this 138 will create into two blocks. Block one is with 128, and block two with rest of the 2 MBs. Okay, so that's what this file client will split this data into two files, and first he will look into that whichever the nearest data node, he will bring this data and stores here. Okay, in the data node one he will store this block one, And in Hadoop, we have the concept called the data replication. So minimum the data replication is that 3 times. Okay, so the advantage of this is, okay, so first let me explain this. Okay, the once this block one stores here, your client will come and look into the nearest data node and store this one. And this no data node will go and store replicate this data in the next data node. Next data node, whichever has the space, it will go and replicate this one. This is another replica of this block one, and this will go and replicate that third replica here. And the same thing for that second block two. So block two will come and first store here, and first the replica will come here, and the last replica, assume that it's storing in the last node. So the advantages of this is, let's say if this node got failed, okay, so your data will not be lost. Your B2 will be there in 2 more places. Okay, even your, as I said, the commodity machine is a low cost machine, as like our laptop. If this laptop got crashed also, this data is available in other places to process back. And this data node, it's a continuously every 3 seconds, it will send the heartbeat to name node. Name node need to aware that whether this data node is alive or dead. Okay, so that's where this heartbeat is came in picture. Every 3 seconds, it will send the heartbeat back to name node, and then it will take care of replication as well. And so when we look into this name node, the main, and every 6 hours in this old architecture, every 6 hours there is a black scan report. Means this data node will send a report to name node on the availability space, how much space is available and how much space is used, all that kind of report back to name node. So the name node, their main purpose is manage this entire cluster management, and also managing this metadata of this data. Let's say if we want to process this data back, this name node will have a one meta file called, let's say B1. B1 will have one meta file here, and when you request, you want to process this data back from here. So this data node, first data node, whichever available, it will send back this B1 data back to name node. So along with the B1 data, they will send this meta file also back. So if there is any corruption in the data in this data node, this name node will do this cross check, and it will say that this data got corrupted. Okay, so that's the kind of checking mechanism it will take care. So name node will perform all this here. And there is a two kinds of files it will create. One is files FS image, and the second one is edit log. The FS image is, the idea is to have the data of some inception to till last 1 hour, and the edit log will have the last 1 hour data. And this secondary name node, it's a kind of, it will take this FS image and edit log data, it will do checkpointing, and it will create a new FS image. So this new FS image again send back to the name node, and again that recent 1 hour data will build in the edit log. This is the high level architecture. And if there is a question that if a name node fails, what will happen? Okay, so entire this processing, whatever it's there, taking care of metadata management will get lost. That's where this high availability architecture came in picture. And there is a Zookeeper, so it's a coordination server. It will look into this active name node. It will take this Zookeeper failover control, monitor both the active name node and standby name node, and it will take care of maintaining this entire cluster. And also this name node continuously, it will share this data, write the data to network file system, and this will be get read by this standby name node. Okay. And in this architecture, this data node will send back the heartbeats and block scan reports to both active name node and standby name node. So this every 3 seconds the heartbeat will send, and here in this architecture every 30 seconds the blocks and reports will send to this both active and standby name node. If let's say if this active name node got failed, what they will do is this zookeeper will fence this active name node, and it will revoke this write permissions. And there is a one file called inuse.log file. It will get removed from here, and it will copy into standby name node. Then standby name node will have the write permission, and it will start acting as a active name node. So all this need to complete within 3 minutes if the name node got failed. And there is another question: if name node is not able to handle all this, how to handle, okay, how to scale? So then we will have that 2 name nodes, one for ETL purpose, one for the reporting purpose. And same other high level, high availability architecture applies to this both. And if there is a question that if this secondary name node or standby name node fails, what we will do? So if we want, we need to have another rack, and then take this data into another backup rack. It's all based on the cost. So this the roadmap in this okay, overall architecture, the components I tell. The ingestion, okay, the data ingestion scoop for bringing the data from RDBMS to HDFS files, importing and exporting back from HDFS files to RDBMS. And this NiFi is that for real-time data processing, it will take all the real-time data like onboarding diagnosis and sensors data and Twitter data, all this, it will take the data from this Twitter, and it will give this data to big data tools, okay. And this Flume is the old technology. After NiFi came in, they are not using this Flume much. This log collector. And we have this HDFS for the storage, and Wooji for the orchestration or flow management purpose. And the Pig, I said it's a scripting language, and the Yarn is for processing purpose. Hive is that for batch querying the purpose, and the Headspace is for OLTP or online real-time purpose. So this Phoenix is a SQL layer on top of this Headspace. Headspace is a NoSQL database. It is a columnar store, and the Spark is a very high-speed processing machine. The Spark is written on the Scala language. And this Ambari is the another kind of provisioning for cluster, okay, cluster provisioning and management and monitoring of the cluster. And this Maven is this the packages, the Scala packages will written and manage in this Maven. And GitHub is the configuration management. This Elasticsearch is the another NoSQL kind of database, and the Elasticsearch and Kibana, they used to call ELK. It will work together, and the Kibana will have that dashboards, okay. And this is the Hadoop Hortonworks data platform, and there is a Google cloud platforms, and this Amazon S3 is the storage system. And as I said earlier, this Zookeeper is a coordination service. So same thing is applied in this also, another view of that same. So in the batch, we have Scoop, and we have HDFS, Kafka for storage and processing, and Hive and Pig, and there is security. We have Apache Knox here, then Hue or Kibana for visualization. And the same thing for this batch processing, we have NiFi, ELK, and Spark. And here that Ranger is the security tool. And we have another in-memory processor. It's if we want a real-time fast, this is in-memory layer. This one, we have HBase, Spark, and Kerberos is for security, and we have the dashboards, and we have Kibana, Grafana, many dashboards are available. So if required, I will take another session. I don't want to go all these architectures. And look into this big data, the applications. It's widely used in across all the industries, like banking, media, entertainment, healthcare, retail, insurance, all the sectors they are using. And I will go through some of these real-time use cases. Okay, so there is a 360-degree view of the customer and better business intelligence. Okay, what this means, what people are expecting is by 2030, all our walls will be not that normal walls what we have. It's a like a wall, and it will act as a TV, and also it's a connect to the internet. If a person on a midnight, if he get a stomachache, he will go and switch on that LED, and it will he will connect to a doctor, and doctor will come in online. He will explain the problem. I have stomachache. He will ask what different question what he ate and all that, and finally, okay, he will come up with a prescription, online prescription. In a 5 minute, a drone will bring your medicines at your doorstep or in your balcony. You will collect that medicines, and it's connected. Okay, that's the kind of thing people are looking in the next 10 years. Okay, and also daily insurance. A person today is taking that insurance for a year. People tomorrow, in a 5 to 10 years period, there will be a 360 view of his work. Means today what is there in his calendar. Okay, if he want to go work or work from home, if he want to go work, and they will automatically, yeah, one day insurance will get generated, and he will use that car insurance. He will draw, and if he has some plan, if he want to go to some restaurant, the restaurant table will be get booked, and if he has some other appointments, everything. If you define your calendar, everything will be automated. This is a kind of 360 degrees of view that people are looking in the next 5 to 10 years. And this governments and politicians, they are widely using. Today, the elections are becoming like if like Donald Trump, if he can go and ask Oxford Analytica, help me to win this election. They will study and analyze this Facebook of different customers, what their feedback on a candidate, and they will say that if you go to Florida, they're expecting this, you need to speak in these terms. If you go to New York, they are expecting job security, you need to speak on those terms. So your elections, even in India, okay, people are hiring and Prashant Kishore to win elections. Okay, in back end, they are doing all this big data process, and that's why this electoral campaigns. And then customer acquisition and retention. So, okay, the customer behavior, okay, means they want to see how the customer is spending and what kind of products the customer is buying. If you see Amazon, so each and everything in the Amazon browser, what we are doing, they're very closely looking into these clicks, and they have a system called a recommender system, and okay, it will recommend what you want. If you take a phone, they will recommend a screen guard and pouch to that mobile, all that. And then this fraud prevention, it's a very important. Earlier I worked for a customer, okay, they have 2.5 billion pounds of revenue in UK. So their profit is 240 millions. In that, in the fraud itself, we saved 120 millions. If we used all, and we have gone through 2 levels down of a person and his family, and family friends, and his family friends, next level of people, and we studied the frauds out of that, and we taken care of all the claims and their policy issuance. It saved 120 million. If we do 120 million not saved, then 240 million profit might have become minus 120, means 120 million only. So there's a kind of fraud under this forecasting and the price optimization. They want to see, if you see before pandemic, a laptop is 28,000 for a normal HP. Now the chips are not available, and there is a they increased the laptop cost to 32,000. Okay, that's the kind of demand they are looking, and they are increasing the cost and optimizing the cost according to that. And the same thing, this personalization, like a Netflix, they will recommend that based on person to person which movies he like. He like action, he like drama, all this kind of thing. Same thing, content analysis. They are coming with deep learning analysis and doing this kind of content-based advertising and promotion. A typical example is a serial. If we are watching, there is a Satguru Sai serial. Okay, in my native, when they are watching, the advertisements are different. They are elderly people, when they are watching, they have advertisements like elderly people's diapers and other healthcare products. When we are watching in Chennai, we have different kind of things. So this kind of different advertisements. And same thing, preventive medicine and preventive maintenance. One example is they are looking into all the IoTs, like Toyo is the company. They are studying the tires, how tires, and they are getting all the information using IoTs, and then they are saying that in the next 1 month you need to do tire replacement or bring this vehicle maintenance. So this is a kind of a different use case. Okay, and yeah, thank you. I took quite a lot more time. Yeah, thank you for everyone. Okay, stay safe. And if you want, this is my contact in LinkedIn. You can contact me through LinkedIn. Okay.
Thank you,
Yeah,
sir.
that's all. Yeah, thank you. Any questions? Yeah, please.
Thank you, sir, for this amazing and informative session. So if attendees, if you have any queries related to this topic, you may either write it down in the chat box, or you can I directly ask sir about it. Anyone?
So this is a very good area since many people are in college. Okay, so the basics things required for this technology is have good skills on your Unix shell scripting, and have some develop your SQL skills. That's going to help you a lot. Okay, so the opportunities are so good. Okay, and I will tell you, in Chennai, when I was undergoing for this training, along with that, one guy, he's a director in some HP company, and he has 28 years experience. Along with him, his daughter is a third year BTech student. She used to come for this training. Okay, so that's the kind of thing people are working. Okay, and the opportunities are too good. Okay, so this is going to be stay for quite a long. Okay, so please learn the things, and if you need, many people are providing this online trainings. So spend some good amount of 5-6 months training who are in the third year or fourth year of a BTech. So utilize the opportunities. So you have so many opportunities in the market.
Okay, thank you, sir. So with this, we come to the end of the session. Thank you for your valuable time and presence, and thank you all participants for joining us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you everyone. Yeah,
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you a
thank
lot.
you. Thank you. I will stop my presentation.
Okay, okay. Okay, sir. Thank you. Shall I
Yeah.
end it?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.